Is it possible that some of us came in here today and we're carrying this heavy bag of hurt? Maybe it was something a coworker said. They said something and it just stung, and you're still carrying around that hurt. And maybe it was 10 to 15 years ago. Maybe in your family you felt like there was favoritism and that you were never the favorite. And as a result, you are carrying around a heavy bag of anger and bitterness and resentment. Maybe it was something that your spouse did. Maybe they're so engrossed in their hobbies and you feel unimportant, like you're not really a priority. Maybe it happened at a church. If there's any place we think, well, it should be safe, but then something happened at a church and you got hurt and you're still carrying that hurt around, and what you're not aware of is that hurt is weighing you down. Here's the question of today. Who hurt you? Is it a parent? Is it a spouse? Is it a pastor? Is it one of your kids? What do you do when you're carrying around a heavy bag of hurt? What do you do when you just have this anger and resentment and bitterness and unforgiveness flowing through your vein? What do you do when you feel weighted down by hurts from the past? Now, guys, what we're going to talk about today is such an important topic because we live in a fallen, broken world. As a result, we're going to get hurt. And guess what? We're going to hurt others. And Jesus' will for us is to live the abundant life. And I believe that if you and I want to live the abundant life, we need to learn to be really good at letting go of hurt. We need to be really good at practicing forgiveness. Are you a practicing forgiver or a resentful grudge bearer? One of the spiritual practices of a healthy person is learning how to let go, learning how to forgive, learning how to put down that bag of hurt and quit carrying it. And today I want to talk to you about the spiritual practice of letting go. And I want to just give credit to Pastor Clarence St. John. On September 19th, we had a prayer meeting right here where pastors from all over the section came and prayed and fast. And Pastor St. John is one of my role models. He's a humble, soft-spoken, wise man. And I often ask myself, what would Pastor St. John do? But at that gathering, he gave a message. And as he was giving this message, I'm like, I need to give this message to the church. So I just want to give him credit as the seed thought for this message. But I really believe that some of you are sovereignly here today because you needed to hear this message. And our text today is 1 Samuel 16:1. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I've rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I've chosen one of his sons to be king." Now, the first person we come across in this story is Samuel. Who was Samuel? He was a prophet, and he was the last judge of Israel. He also anointed the first two kings of Judah, Saul and David. So Samuel is a very important person in the God story. Next, we hear about this guy named Saul. And what we've learned is that God rejected Saul as king of Israel. Now, who was Saul? Well, he was the first king of Israel. So think about George Washington, the first, not king of America, but the first president of America. That was Saul. And what you need to know about Saul is that he was probably voted the most attractive man alive. He was striking features. He would have walked into a room and heads would have turned. And from the outside looking in, he looked like he had it all together. But how many of you are aware that looks can be deceiving? He had a great image, but his character did not match his image. One of my concerns with our culture is that there is such an emphasis on image. There's such an emphasis on the outward person. But God is not interested in those things. Did you know that? God doesn't look at our outward appearance, the Bible says. He looks at our heart. And I want to talk specifically to some of you young people. Again, you're being brought up in a culture where it's all about image. It's all about how you look. It's all about those sort of things. But what's more important is character. And character is who you are when no one is looking. Character is who you are in the dark. And Saul had this amazing image, but his character was lacking. Specifically, he was very impulsive. He disobeyed God, and he wrestled with jealousy. And because of this, God rejected him as king. In fact, in 1 Samuel 15:22, it says, "But Samuel replied, 'Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifice as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry.'" Now watch this. "Because, Saul, you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king." Okay, so what we're learning is that God has rejected Saul because of his character defects. And Samuel is mourning this reality. And some of you could maybe relate to this. Maybe you put your trust in a human leader and they let you down. Maybe you watch someone on TV teach the Bible for 20 years and then later it comes out they were living a double life. And there's a sense of mourning. And Samuel is mourning this reality of God rejecting Saul. I mean, maybe he thought back to the day when he anointed Saul. And there was so much promise. There was so much hope for the future. There was so much excitement about what could be. And now this? Let me tell you something. It's so important to never put your ultimate trust in another human being because they will let you down. I tell you all the time, don't put me on a pedestal, put me on your prayer list. Our ultimate trust needs to be in Jesus Christ. And Samuel is mourning this reality of Saul being rejected as king. And God says to Samuel, "How much longer will you mourn Saul?" And that's my question to you today. How much longer will you mourn Saul? How much longer will you carry around this heavy bag of hurt? How much longer will you allow that poison of bitterness and anger and resentment to flow through your veins? How much longer will you mourn Saul? Now, please do not misunderstand me. There is a time to mourn. In fact, Jesus said in Matthew 5:4, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." So I'm not saying don't mourn. Of course we need to mourn, and sometimes mourning takes time. But today I'm talking about the person that is carrying things from years. Maybe this thing happened 10 years ago, and you're still carrying it with you. Yes, we need to mourn. There's a time to mourn, and there's a time to move on. Who has hurt you? What unforgiveness and bitterness and anger and resentment are you still carrying? Now, one of the ways that we can mourn is by forgiving the person who has hurt you. You say, "Steve, how do I know if I need to forgive someone?" Well, years ago I came across this checklist, and I just want to share it with you. And I want you to think about the dash lights on your car. If those go on, it's saying something's going on, right? And what I'm about to read to you are some dashboard lights that can say, hey, maybe there's unforgiveness in your heart. Maybe there's bitterness and anger and resentment that you need to let go of. So here we go. If you have a strong emotional reaction when you see the person who hurt you, your insides just about jump out of your skin when you see them, your heart races and your mind races. If you rehearse speeches of what you'd like to say to them, "See, I was right. I told you so." If you imagine ways of getting even or getting revenge. If you can't sincerely bless that person, you have a hard time seeing them blessed. If you can't honestly rejoice when good things happen to them. If you're having difficulty in your relationship with God, either your prayers are not answered as they once were, or you're having difficulty coming into God's presence, if God seems maybe distant. If you're having physical problems, depression, difficulty sleeping or resting, those may be signs that you need to forgive someone. Here's the question: who do you need to forgive today? What anger and resentment and bitterness did you come in here today carrying? And maybe you weren't even aware of the reality that you've been weighed down by all of this. And God brought you here today because he wants you to let go of that. Somebody says, well, what is forgiveness? Well, the word forgiveness, notice that word give. So forgiveness is giving away that hurt, giving away that anger, that resentment, that bitterness. Now, the opposite of forgiveness is holding on to it. The word forgiveness actually means to send away. Imagine I had a balloon and I blew into it anger and hurt and resentment and bitterness. And then I just held on to it for the rest of my life and carried that balloon of hurt wherever I went. Got a chip on my shoulder. That's the opposite of forgiveness. See, forgiveness is letting that balloon go, sending it to the Lord and saying, God, it hurt, it mattered, but I release it into your hands. Who do you need to forgive? Who do you need to let go of? Who do you need to say, God, you settle the score? Well, somebody says, okay, that's forgiveness. What isn't forgiveness? Well, first of all, forgiveness is not a feeling. In other words, you won't always feel like forgiving someone. In fact, most of the time you'll probably feel like doing the opposite, right? Forgiveness is not a feeling. And after you've forgiven someone, you won't always feel like you've forgiven them. But here's the thing. As Christians, I say this all the time, we walk by faith and not feelings. When I need to forgive someone, I pray this prayer. Lord, I bless them, I forgive them, and I wish them well. I may not feel like praying that prayer. But you know what? I may pray it 100 times a day because I'm hoping it sinks into my heart. Would you say it with me? Lord, I bless them, I forgive them, and I wish them well. Those bad thoughts come into your mind. Lord, I bless them, I forgive them, and I wish them well. You're going throughout your day, you're doing your work, thoughts come in. Lord, I bless them, I forgive them, and I wish them well. Now, forgiveness is not pretending it didn't hurt. Well, it didn't hurt, it didn't really matter. That's a form of lying. It did hurt, it did matter. But I release it. It's not accepting what the other person did was right. There's no right way to do the wrong thing. So when you forgive someone, it's not saying, oh, what they did was right. It's just saying, again, I'm not going to hold on to it anymore. Now, here's a big one. Are you listening? Say amen. This is so important to understand. There's a difference between forgiveness and trust. Forgive. Forgiveness is something you give unconditionally. Trust is something that's earned. And it may take time to build trust. Isn't it interesting how you can spend a whole life building trust and lose it in a moment? So there is a difference between forgiveness and trust. God isn't asking you to automatically trust that person again. By their fruit you will know them, said Jesus. Here's another thing. Forgiveness is not relieving the other person of responsibility. In other words, when we do something wrong, often there's natural consequences that come along with it. And forgiveness is not saying, well, they don't have to pay the natural consequences. It's just, again, saying, I'm not going to try to sell the score anymore. I'm not going to try to get revenge. Our culture teaches revenge. God teaches forgiveness. The world's way is revenge. The Jesus way is forgiveness. And then finally, forgiveness is not forgetting. Lewis Smedes wrote a book on forgiveness, and he says, you don't have to forget after you forgive. You may, but your forgiving can be sincere even if you remember. Who do you need to forgive today? How long will you mourn Saul? Well, somebody says, well, why should I forgive? They don't deserve it. They hurt me. They hurt my child. Why should I forgive them? Ephesians 4:32, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. I don't know about you, but I didn't deserve to be forgiven by the Lord. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. We didn't deserve it. And the reason we forgive is not because the person deserves it. We forgive because Christ has forgiven us. Who do you need to forgive today? The Lord's Prayer, it says, forgive us our trespasses as we what? Forgive those who trespass against us. Colossians 3:12, bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive because you feel like it. That's not what it says. It says, forgive as the Lord forgave you. There's a story about a guy who was out in the wilderness, and all of a sudden this rattlesnake came and bit him. And he got super upset, and he went over and grabbed a stick, and he started to chase this rattlesnake because he wanted to hurt it because it hurt him. But what he forgot is that as he was doing that, there was poison running through his system. The wiser choice would have been, hey, get rid of this poison, right? And some of us have been bit and stung and hurt, and that poison's in our body, and we're spending all of our mental energy on hurting them back, when the wiser thing is to say, Lord, help me to get rid of this poison. Unforgiveness, someone said, is the poison we drink hoping someone else will die. Unforgiveness is the poison we drink hoping someone else will die. And I've learned if you want to live the abundant Christian life, you need to be a good forgiver. The opposite is you can be a resentful grudge bearer. You can walk through life with a chip on your shoulder. You can be angry and bitter and resentful. In this hurting world, we will be hurt. I will hurt you. You're going to hurt me. The question is, how do we respond? Our response is our responsibility. The world's way is to get revenge. The Jesus way is to forgive. What if we chose to do the Jesus way? So let's go back to our text, 1 Samuel 16, verse 1. The Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, since I've rejected him as king over Israel? Now watch this. Fill your horn with oil. Be on your way. I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I've chosen one of his sons to be king. So after God says to Samuel, how long will you mourn Saul? Then he says, fill the horn with oil. Get going. Go and anoint David. In other words, there's a sense of letting go of the past and moving into the future. And when we have unforgiveness in our heart towards someone, we're really chaining ourselves to the past. And one of the things that is easy to do is to live out of your memory, not your imagination. To live out of that past hurt instead of your future potential. And God says to Samuel, get going, move on, fill the horn with oil and anoint David. I want you to imagine a person driving through life looking out the rearview mirror. Imagine that. You don't do that. You look in front of you. I hope. All right? That's the way some of us are living, is we're living looking out of the rearview mirror. You know, this is something that we need to be careful as a church. As we get older, it's easy to think, well, our glory days are behind us. You know, you go to some church and it's like it's a museum of their past. And yes, we need to honor the past, but we need to understand that God's got a vision for us. He's got a plan. I know the plans I have for you. Plans for a future and plans for hope. And I just want to have you think about this morning. Are you living out of your memory? Are you always looking back? Are you always focusing on that past hurt? Or do you understand that God has a vision and a plan for your life? You say, what is a vision? A vision is a picture of a preferred future that produces passion. A vision is a picture of a preferred future that produces passion. And some of you, maybe you're up there in years and you think, well, vision is for younger people. Wrong. I don't care if you're 18, if you're 38, or if you're 88, God has a plan and a purpose for your life. The devil wants you to think, oh, you're not important anymore. No, God has a plan and a purpose for your life. And I think what some of us need to do is we need to spend time with the Lord and say, Lord, what is your vision? Someone said if we want to discover God's vision, we need to turn off the television. We need to spend time with the Lord and say, Lord, what is your plan? What is your purpose? God has a plan and a purpose for your life. Some of you are going through a difficult season, and it's like you're focused on this storm, and I understand, I've been there, but I want you to understand that God has a plan and a purpose for you. So I met with Pastor St. John about a month ago, and we had lunch, and he's a mentor of mine, and just again, a role model for me. And he said something that was very impactful to me. He was our former district superintendent, so he was kind of overseeing the churches of Minnesota in our faith tribe. And he said a lot of his job was dealing with problems. And he said if he wasn't careful, it could become all about dealing with problems. So he said he intentionally carved out time in his schedule to dream, to seek vision. And he said this statement, I wrote it down, and it's been so impactful for me. Focus on vision, not problems. Now, I'm not saying you don't deal with problems. Of course you do. But if life becomes all about taking out the garbage, that's not very exciting. Now, you have to take out the garbage or things begin to stink. But are we seeking God's vision for our life? Are we so focused on the hurt of the past that we've lost a vision for the future? Are we so focused on the hurt of the past that we've lost a vision for the future? Paul said, brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind, striving towards what's ahead. What if some of us just took some time this week and said, Lord, what is your vision for my life? What are you wanting to do in me and through me and beyond me? Some of you are bored and you think your best days are behind you. You know, Pastor St. John is a great example. After he retired from being the district superintendent, he's now been an interim pastor at 8 churches, and I was meeting with him, and he's telling me about all these things he's going to be doing. And some of you, I just want to say, God has a plan and a purpose for your life. Your best days are in front of you, not behind you. God says to Samuel, how long will you mourn Saul? On August 12th, 1978, Darrell Stingley, a wide receiver for the New England Patriots, went up to catch a pass when he was hit violently by Oakland Raider Jack Tatum. Now that hit changed his life because it broke his neck and left him a quadriplegic. The rest of his life he spent in a wheelchair. And after this happened, he was very angry and bitter at Jack. He was also angry and bitter at God. God, why did you allow this to happen? God, why? And one day he began to realize that holding on to that hurt towards Jack wasn't hurting Jack. It was hurting him. And he realized that by holding on to that hurt, he was imprisoning himself in the past and wasn't able to move into the future. So there came the day when he said, I'm going to forgive Jack and I'm going to move on. He said, and I quote, "It's only after I stopped asking why and chose to forgive Jack," now notice this, "that I could go on with my life." He then chose to use his hurt to help others. He started visiting paralyzed people in the hospital, and he started volunteering for the inner city youth of Chicago. Maybe today is your day to let go. Maybe today is your day to say it hurt, it mattered, but I'm going to release that into the Lord's hands. If you would bow your heads with me. Guys, remember that the world's way is revenge. The Jesus way is forgiveness. And I believe that some of you, the Lord brought you here today so that you could let go. Some of you have been carrying this for many, many years. And maybe it's even scary to let go of it, because that's where you get a lot of your energy, is that anger and resentment. But that's the world's way. The Jesus way is forgiveness. And if the Lord has brought someone to mind that you need to forgive, ask him to do that right now. Lord, is there anyone that I need to forgive? Maybe it's yourself. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's a pastor. Maybe it's a child. If that's you, would you just, in your spirit, pray this prayer with me? By an act of my will and God's power, I choose to forgive, fill in the blank. I give this hurt to God. I choose to give up my right to get even. I make a commitment that when those sordid feelings come, I will release them. I won't babysit them. I admit those feelings are real, but I choose not to be controlled by them any longer. From this day forward, with God's help, I will dwell on the goodness of God and God's vision for my life. God, I know that folks have brought before you unforgiveness and bitterness and anger. God, and I just pray that you, Holy Spirit, will just do a great work in their hearts. That as they leave here today, as we celebrate communion in a few moments, that we'll just nail that hurt to the cross and be changed on the inside, because that poison is gone. We love you, Jesus. We ask this in your name. And everyone said? So again, some of us came in here carrying this thing. But it's my prayer that after what we just did, that we would get rid of some of this stuff. Man, this is heavy.